telling you how much I look forward to our dance off during the countdown. I hope you guys are dancing. We're dancing. It's awesome.
So we are here.
Feel better.
Yeah, a little bit. We're here a little bit earlier than normal on a Tuesday.
Surprise.
Welcome to September 7th. I have some ownership stuff to take care of this afternoon that's a little bit time sensitive. So we still wanted to come here. We know that we're catching some of you, probably more of you than normal on the replay crew. So that's totally cool. Make sure to tell us if you are on the replay crew here on the YouTube. We love our replay crew. Comment below. Also, podcast listeners, as always, never hesitate to reach out to us with your reactions to this video whenever you are listening to the audio of it. Today, we are going to jump in to one of our favorite topics, actually, that we talk about with each other all the time.
And we've
never talked about with y'all.
I know.
So we're excited to do it.
Yeah. And I have to apologize for those of you that follow us on social media that saw that our GDD Live was happening today at the same time, because no matter how many times Dr. Kristen told me that we were doing today at 12, I am thus programmed to type 3 o'clock. So if you missed this because you're busy and you know that we're on at 3 and you log on at 3 and we're not there, I'm sorry. But if you log on at 3, you can watch the replay. And sorry.
Yeah.
We're humans.
We are imperfect people doing imperfect things, which is a great entry into our empathy exercises for the day.
That is right. So, number 1 on the empathy exercise list, coming to you from your Indian country correspondent, Dr. Hinson, as we have now named each other, came across my feed from our friends at Indian Country Today, which actually has Indian country correspondents. I am not one of them. The installation of art installations all across Los Angeles, reminding residents that they live on Tongva land and that the Tongva peoples are alive and present and active in the Los Angeles area. So there's 7 billboards all across the Los Angeles area that feature 6 indigenous artists with a message of support for the Tongva people. So really cool empathy exercise. If you're in Los Angeles and you watch our stuff, like take a picture of the billboards and put it in the comments. That would be really cool. We'd love to hear about people engaging with this art, but it's a super cool, simple way to hopefully prompt people to learn more about the Tongva peoples of that area.
And myself and my husband will be in Los Angeles in November after a very long and arduous fight with American Airlines, but we got there, guys. We will be there in November. I'm speaking at the National Association of Christian Social Workers, and then we'll be going to Avengers Land because always on brand. Hello. But we will make sure to look out for those billboards. But any of our delightful friends, followers, and neighbors who are in the LA area now, we would love an earlier update.
Yeah. For sure. Super excited. Look out for Good Doctors on the Road. Dr. Kristen will take some video footage when she can find a few of these super cool billboards. I'm all about billboard art rather than like yelling at me about Roman.
Oh my gosh. Or here in Philly, we have Steven Singer, he's a jeweler, and all of their billboards are very aggressive.
They are very aggressive. There's a lot of aggressive ones on 95. I feel like it's very Philadelphia.
We're perpetually grumpy and a little bit on edge. Just so
in your face. You're on 95. I'm going to tell you about my jewelry.
That's what's going to happen. All right. Next up.
Next up is one that I found over the weekend and shared with Dr. Kristen, not in a work capacity. And then she was like, you know what? That's make a great empathy exercise. So empathy exercises, we're constantly learning how terrible Ellen DeGeneres is. No, I kid. She's not terrible. She's a complicated human being, but her interview format leaves a lot to be desired, especially when she talks to famous people.
Well, I think the thing is, we've always thought about her as this queen of kindness.
Yeah.
And so in that way, like when we're looking back, she's really not.
She's really not kind.
She's not kind. She might be warm. You can be warm without being kind. But as I look back at all of her content, kind is not a word I would associate with her interview style anymore. Now that I have a more critical eye.
Yeah. And like for me, this, because my mom used to like watch Ellen religiously. So it was on very often in our house. I work from home. So I would see Ellen and see clips of it. And for me, it started with her Game of Games. It started with her games that she would do on the show. And now she has like syndicated television show about it as well, where she's very often like hurtful to people and laughs at their inability to do the games. And it's all for a joke, but she's the one down on the stage just like laughing at people be ridiculous. I don't know. It comes across in not a kind way. But what the long way to what we're talking about is a lot of people this weekend on the Twitterverse were resharing a 2013 interview with our girl Taylor Swift, who is like ride or die for the Good Doctors. So you come for Taylor Swift, you come for the Good Doctors is how we feel about it. We have gone through a transitionary phase because back in 2013, we were probably judging Tay-Tay along with Ellen. But it's a terrible, let's just be honest, it's a terrible interview. Which the person who leaked to Glamour leaked like the unedited content in which Taylor is on the verge of tears as Ellen just berates her with images of people she has supposedly had dated or rumored to have dated or not even dated at all. And it very clearly makes Taylor feel horrible. And she says out loud a couple times, she's like, this is the part of my life I feel terrible about.
Yeah.
In the interview. And like, so a great empathy exercise is to watch this and to think it's an exercise in what not to do. Because also, what Ellen should do is listen to the person she's in conversation with and listen to her say, please stop. This is hurtful to me. And she doesn't.
Also to remember that everything is edited. So it's very like, there's been times I know some people who know some famous people and they've told stories about like, yeah, you know, that episode of Fallon went for them in this area and we had said not to do it. And the editing shows that they were really having a good time, but like, they're not, you know, so it's a lot of, all of that is for ratings. All of that is for PR and very rarely does the human person have a say in what happens. Because at that point, I guarantee you Taylor's team loved this narrative because it was getting her clicks.
Yeah. And, you know, we will talk till the end of time about the beauty of the documentary Miss Americana that we've watched multiple times. We're covering it later this year on our YouTube and then podcast. So look out for it if you haven't seen it. We love to talk about Miss Americana. But Taylor went through this evolution where she bought into the way she was sold for a lot of ways, and the evolution of her voice and being able to say like, this is not who I am. And this is not how I want to go about being in the world. But it's also a good reminder for us of how easy it is for our culture to be judgmental, especially about young women. And we talk about Britney Spears, and Dr. Kristen from Jesusland talks all about purity culture and the toxic way that it shapes the way we look and talk about young women and who they do and do not have romantic or other relationships with. And so for me, I was like, oh yeah, that was probably from a time where I was like, oh, Taylor, she just dates a lot of people. What's wrong with her? You know, it's none of my business. It's none of any of our businesses. So a difficult but important empathy exercise. My heart breaks again for any human that had to go through what that interview shows, because that would on like national television, even if it wasn't aired, she was still doing it in front of a live audience, and that's just traumatic. Switching to happier news. Dr. Kristen has an update from her time in Texas.
Oh my gosh, guys. So one of my biggest pet peeves about, and not like anger, I have a list of anger things at Baylor and I have a list of pet peeves. So know that there is a difference. My pet peeve has been that the women's basketball team has been called the Lady Bears forever, even though they've won more championships than the men have, and are now from my understanding, I just did a quick count on alumni lists, but it looks like we have more professional players in the WNBA than we have in the NBA. We're a very prolific basketball school. Very. Also a lot of drama. You can feel free. I'm happy to talk about the murder that happened, but I digress. We finally, guys, Waco's a place. Waco is a place with a capital P.
Like all caps place. Things happen in Waco.
They really do. It's just a place. Any whoozle what's it's, any hoodle. They finally dropped the name Lady. So the women's basketball team is the Bears, just like every other team on campus. I believe we'd already done that with soccer and we'd already done it, but the basketball team's kind of the banner one. Because like they'd be in the Final Four and everybody else was just themselves, and then you had Lady Bears, and I'm like, come on. So I am thrilled to announce that heretofore the women's basketball program at Baylor University are simply the Bears.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I mean, we've had this discussion, I think, a lot offline because we're both avid sports fans. I don't know how much we've had it online about the ways in which we categorize like women's sports.
Yeah. Yeah.
So professional leagues are like, we have Major League Baseball. That does not indicate a gender.
No.
We have the NBA and then we have the WNBA. And it's always this, like, we have to categorize gender to let you know.
That the male is the standard.
That the male is the default. Yeah. So we don't call it, we call it Olympic ice hockey and women's Olympic ice hockey.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing this kind of chipping away at this assumed default that the men are the default in sports world and in other worlds. And Dr. Kristen actually shared hockey news with me, y'all.
Sometimes it happens.
Sometimes it happens. I hadn't seen this yet.
Mostly because I spend time on Instagram and she doesn't.
If it's not trending on Twitter, so I didn't see it yet. But speaking of names and names changing, shout out to our friend Jay, who I know is watching, who is also a devout hockey fan. The National Women's Hockey League announced today, September 7th, that it will henceforth be known as the Premier Hockey Federation, thus removing the gender designation and then opening it up to, non-binary folks who want to play in the league. Who knows? Non-gender conforming. So I'm reading from their press statement. No labels, no limits. PHF now defined by the talent and skill of its athletes. Woot, woot. Yes, Jay. Woot, woot. They are redefining the league's brand based on the skill and talent of its athletes as opposed to their gender, and is the first professional women's sports league in North America to lift the word women's out of its title. Boom. Super excited about it. Please, many more of these things coming forward. And, had to be in the empathy exercise. Dr. Kristen literally told me about it as we were about to go live. And I was like, I'm throwing it in.
Yep.
So links below to the press statement. And we're super excited to support the Premier Hockey Federation as it goes forward. Delightful. The last one we have, go, Dr. Kristen, go.
Is some great news, again, that we learned from Instagram, proving that all social media is not a dumpster fire, just, 80% of it. There is essentially in Mexico City, there has been forever a statue of Christopher Columbus that I actually know from friends is like one of those geographic like markers, like, hey, meet me at this thing. And it is being destroyed and will be replaced with art by an indigenous artist. And we are overjoyed that this is happening. So again, if you are not on our Colonizers World Tour with us, you may be unaware that Christopher Columbus was a human trash fire, but he was. And I'm sure he had redeeming qualities while he wasn't on fire, but he wasn't a great dude. And he isn't somebody that like we need to keep venerating. And so love, especially when lands that he conquered and enslaved. and abused are taking back their narrative and giving the power to the indigenous folks. So speaking of Christopher Columbus, though, I'm so proud of this transition.
It's such a great transition, and I hate to interrupt it, but I want to make sure and say that the statue is going to be of a woman from the Olmec civilization, and we don't have statues of women, y'all. So it's also removing Columbus, big up, replacing it with a woman. We don't put women in statues. So 2 thumbs up for the mayor of Mexico City. Sorry, continue with your excellent transition.
Also, Olmec tribe is like Legends of the Hidden Temple reference. Okay, so my amazing transition. Yes. Speaking of problematic things,
what a transition!
Christopher Columbus is a great example of somebody that we can actually choose not to engage with anymore. But how do we engage with things that are still engageable and yet problematic? So we want to clarify kind of the difference between engageable and like, okay, let me start over again. We are skeptical of cancel culture. We are very skeptical of it. 9 times out of 10, we are actually going to be academically opposed to the canceling of the person. There are times that we are on board with it, sociologically and academically. We are frustrated with cancel culture that has now become such like this, the way it enacts. But we do believe that people within culture get to be rewritten, and we get to change our mind about them. And we get to decide as a culture to not engage with their output anymore. A classic example of this is William Cosby, who has been, I mean, while not like convicted of crimes because of the system, like everybody knows that he did these things. He confessed to them. Yeah. If you want to enjoy the Cosby Show, or you want to enjoy his old stand-up, I'd even be a little like, there's some women jokes in there that I would hope that now you understand aren't great. But engaging with anything now is much more like, obviously we tell you guys to do you, but from a sociological perspective, we would discourage people from doing that, because what he has proven about himself is that he is more interested in his own pleasure than community engagement. And kind of anyone who is selfish on that level, we as the good doctors tend to not endorse. So.
Yeah. And like we were talking about it this morning before we decided to go live. And if any of you have or haven't watched the fantastic Peacock show, Rutherford Falls, there's a great scene in an episode that's about the judging of a history fair, where some of the people on the history fair have done some maybe problematic things, and like, should they win the history fair because they did a good project, but there's, it's problematic. And so they end up enlisting the entire staff of the PF Chang's that they're eating at, which, fantastic choice. And they're in the kitchen and they're like, well, what about what about Bill Cosby? Like, I can't and so they bring up Bill Cosby. They bring up Michael Jackson. Like, I still love who's another one that we don't engage with anymore. But people are like, but I still love Thriller. And it's this constant, do we still watch Harvey Weinstein's movies? Yeah. Like, it's a complicated scenario, but for my money, when somebody has caused harm to other people, like we talk about, like, do whatever makes you happy as long as you're not harming yourself or others.
Yeah.
Like for me, that's the line that I draw personally. It's like when you've caused direct harm to others.
Yeah.
And you then no, I have a real hard time like still continuing to enjoy Michael Jackson's music. I can recognize it for what it was, but like I have a real hard time sitting down and being like, you know what I want to listen to right now? Thriller, and be okay with thinking about Michael Jackson in that capacity. So I think that's the distinction for me.
Yeah. And this is back to the statue conversation a little bit too, of what's the difference between acknowledgement and celebration. So like, I don't love that there's a Michael Jackson musical, for instance. I don't think there needs, like, especially post Finding Neverland and kind of knowing the things that we know now. and all of that kind of stuff. I don't love that. I don't see a need for it, like all that kind of stuff. So we want to clarify that, like, for instance, we would deeply ask that you stop engaging with R. Kelly. He's on trial right now. Literally right now.
As we speak.
All of those kind of things. There's some other people that are like, a whole community has says that this person is problematic. Please stop engaging with them. A great example of that is Sean King, the activist, where like nearly every Black activist I know tells you to stop following him on social media. So there's people like that. But what we really want to talk about today is like, how do you still enjoy The Bachelor?
Right.
Knowing that it is a abstinence, purity, culture fantasy that is just chock full of problems, or Disney knowing that they routinely can queer content because it's not family friendly, or how do you enjoy the Olympics knowing that Adolf Hitler started the torch relay, like these kind of things? How do you do it? And our answer for that is you just do. And we know that you're looking for something more robust from the Good Doctor. So let me unpack that a little bit here. You can hold many truths in your head at once. For instance, George Washington is the founder of America, and the first president, and we have so much to thank him for. His stepping down at the end of his second term, I will say for a long time, is pretty much the thing that saved America from autocracy at the beginning of our whole experiment. Like, he was a big deal. George Washington also had dentures made of teeth that he pulled from living and breathing slaves.
Yeah.
Both of these things are true. Like, both of these things are true. And we joke all the time, wow, like Lynn left that out of Hamilton. But like, we're not lying.
He did.
Both of those things are true. So Disney, I'll do this one for me, even before they bought Marvel, which obviously now I have a even more complicated relationship with them.
Yeah.
Like, Belle was my Patronus before I knew what a Patronus was.
Yeah.
Like, that movie was foundational to my elementary school experience. Disney movies are a huge part of our family. We used to go see them when they got released. Like, we named our dog Rafiki, guys. Like, I mean, we love Disney. But at the same time, I can hold, and I think there's beautiful, brilliant things they do, especially when I read some of the testimonies of how their employees have been treated during COVID and how they did take care of them in a lot of ways. And John and I have a friend who works for Walt Disney Animation, and her stories are like, oh my God, I want to work there tomorrow. You know?
And like, they have done some really fantastic things lately, like Coco and a lot of their Moana, like.
And for all the trite you want it, like, honestly, I swear to God, half our generation learned what the Battle of Gettysburg was from Remember the Titans. So, like, as trite and Oscar-y as that thing is, it's still a lot of truth. And so, I mean, and you can opine for a long time about Miracle and its incredible point in your life. So the thing is, I can hold that Disney is one of the best storytelling companies the world has ever seen and probably will ever see. They know how to tell a story. Because Disney himself was probably one of the best storytellers of our time, who got the power that he got out of the privilege that he had to do what he did. And I can still say, but you have some serious problematic stuff.
Yeah.
And this is my protest, and this is what I do. And I can say it out loud. I can say, I absolutely love Belle. And I can engage with everybody that thinks it's Stockholm Syndrome. To me, it's not, but okay, you do you guys. I see what you're saying here. Like, let's figure this all out. And then say at the end of the day, I love it. I love it. Even if it is Stockholm Syndrome, I still love it.
Yeah.
But you got to acknowledge the mess. Like, you got to acknowledge that everything is complicated. I can eat Chick-fil-A and still believe in queer rights. Like, these things can be true at once.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to remember, like, we talk about this a lot, that there's a lot of judgment about things people enjoy culturally as well. So, like, people get poo-pooed for watching The Bachelor or for watching, Hallmark movies or reading romance novels. Literally just reading this one right now. But we have to find joy in things as well. And like, I can be a feminist and still enjoy romance novels because I can hold those things in tension.
And also, just for the record, many romance novels are deeply feminist, but please continue.
Yeah, no, a lot of them are. A lot of them have
No.
like super feminist. One of our favorite series, the Ravenels, like all those women are just like baller.
Yeah, and the author centers female pleasure all the time. So.
All the time. So they can, the perception is that they're, you know, keeping women stuck in this role. They're actually can be very progressive. But I think for me, the one that comes up a lot is Thanksgiving.
That's a great one.
And like, how do we enjoy Thanksgiving? For me, Thanksgiving is not about, and I'm not emotionally tied to celebrating the myth of the founding of America. And it is a myth because it's not how it happened. It's a part of the story that then got retold so many times to make us feel better about ourselves.
Yeah.
And completely discounts and excludes Indigenous genocide and cultural genocide that took place and continues to take place. But I think for me, that's it. Like for me, it's about family. It's about coming together and sharing a meal. And those things are really important. I do like taking out time to think about what I'm thankful for. I do it more than just on Thanksgiving. But like for me, that's what the day represents. And I can hold that intention while still advocating for our unlearning and relearning of Indigenous history and culture, celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day, and Native American Heritage Day, which is always on Black Friday, and recognizing that like the origins of Thanksgiving and what it means in terms of our national myth are very problematic. And, you know, I don't think we shouldn't be doing, you know, Puritan plays anymore where like the Puritans and the Indians have dinner together on stage and we dress little kids up as No, we shouldn't be perpetuating the myth, but we can still have Thanksgiving as for what it is for most people, a day of celebration of family and togetherness and food and community. I think for most of us, that's what it is. I don't know a lot of people that still really want to hold on to the Puritan, you know, element of it. It still happens a lot in schools, which is where it needs to change. But like we said, it's messy. But here's an example of how you can navigate the messiness, still keep Thanksgiving for what it means for you personally, and just say, like, you know, we still need to recognize what we did and do to Indigenous folks.
And also just like, let's be honest, Thanksgiving wasn't a holiday until the Civil War when Lincoln created it as a ploy of national unity. And then it wasn't set to November until Wilson, when we needed again a ploy of national unity after World War I. So it's always been, it's not this thing that like Washington set out. Like somebody asked me once, what did Washington eat at Thanksgiving? I was like, he didn't celebrate it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another really important thing. Like we talked about this when we talked about flags and why they matter so much to people. But Thanksgiving is an invented tradition. All traditions are invented. And we operate under this myth, because that's how traditions survive, is that they've always been that way.
Yeah.
When in fact they change all the time.
Yeah.
And so that's an important thing to remember about these traditions too, is that like, you know, Thanksgiving was invented for political purposes and has changed several times since its invention. So it can change again.
It can change again. And for me, I'll just say my 2 cents on Thanksgiving. I believe that it can be a picture of the best parts of America. It can be the idea of hospitality, and it can be the idea of abundance, because we did conquer a land whose land could feed us as a people. And kind of all of those kind of things, we can change it. But just like we actually just had a class with our incredible interns a couple hours ago, and we said all of life is about intention. Mm-hmm. Like, what do you want this to mean? What do you want this to be? We say frequently, by the way, too, if you haven't heard us on this soapbox, we don't believe in guilty pleasures, because pleasure should never be guilty.
Right.
And so that's why you haven't heard us say The Bachelor can still be your guilty pleasure. There is no such thing as a guilty pleasure. By the way, we use The Bachelor a lot because we watched it for a little while, and I still listen to the podcasts about it. And I have a lot of feelings about Pilot Pete if you need to talk about it with somebody. And Colton's very convenient coming out. I have lots and lots of feelings about that.
Drums.
So many drums, all the drums. So it's joy gets to look like joy as long as you hold reality in tension, and as long as you are intentional with your consumption of the world around you. I think a huge part of adulthood is understanding that nothing is unproblematic because humans are problematic. We are all a mess of contradictions and weirdnesses and itchiness and all of that kind of stuff. Like, I'm about to record a NFL podcast. Trust me, let's talk about loving problematic things. Let's talk about every single professional sports league, like all of them, all of them. Let's talk about institutions. Let's talk about watching the World Cup when it's in Qatar. Let's talk about all of these things. But there are decisions that you can make. So, for example, we joke, but we're not joking. So you watch The Bachelor, and that's your joy, and that's amazing. Cool. Some of your donations could go to Planned Parenthood for sex education. You really, really, really love traveling. Amazing. We do too, which is one of the reasons that Abbey Research corporate donations, some of them always go to carbon neutrality charities. I love cruises, and I know that they are terrible for the environment. They are incredible for my soul and for my sense of rest. So I do everything else I can to enjoy this problematic thing in a way that then pays it forward if I can, acknowledging that I enjoy a problematic thing. So there's other ways, like, you spend a lot of time doing this thing that isn't great. Maybe donate your time somewhere else doing a thing that counteracts it. There's options out there. And then there's also, like, options to just kind of quietly boycott. My friend Carrie, since the concussion, actually, I think since Ray Rice was not, in her mind, appropriately punished for violence against his wife, Carrie has not watched a single football game. That's her choice. That's her thing. That's what she does. But she is ride or die for college basketball, like ride or die, and ride or die for the national women's U.S. women's soccer team. So there are ways that you can navigate this as people. We don't believe in shaming anybody ever for things that bring them joy. We do believe in sometimes asking critical questions. So if you have a friend who is still standing Michael Jackson, ask people who really love Woody Allen movies how they feel about Dylan Farrow. Ask people who are still fans of the Royals how they feel about Prince Andrew. And can we hold all of these things in tension?
Yeah, and I think the rubric of harm can be a useful one of causing people actual harm. And, that's a slippery slope as well. And I recognize that. And it's complicated, and we learn as we go. And so, one of the things we've talked about on this particular series is, how to apologize for your past and how to be honest about things that you've done or said. And I was reminded of that you were talking, we've touched a little bit on cancel culture. But I was talking to my brother last night over dinner, and we were talking about Jeopardy, and we've talked about it, and Mike Richards is now out as executive producer. And my brother said that, rumors are that Mayim Bialik is going to replace him. They haven't announced his replacement yet as host, but she had already been announced as like a sort of special edition host. And now people are looking for and finding problematic things that she has said. And so this is the problem that we run into, right? Humans are problematic. Has Mayim Bialik possibly said some controversial things? I don't know. She could have. Did she cause actual harm to people in a way that Mike Richards has been accused of doing? I don't know. But it's murky waters. And it can be hard at times to draw lines. But at the end of the day, almost everything is problematic. And the world is on fire, literally and figuratively. So find joy where you can.
Yeah, I tell people that I am I am a faith-based person who writes fan fiction, and trust me when I understand problematic things. Like
we do.
I still claim the faith of Christ, and people that also claim him make my blood boil. So we all kind of understand how to do problematic. I mean, like, honestly, I still tell people I went to Baylor. So if you want to talk about problematic academic institutions, let's talk about Baylor University.
Whew.
So I still tell people I went to Baylor. There are still parts of my Baylor experience and the Baylor institution I am incredibly proud of. And then there's others that I very loudly and very publicly say, this isn't great. Nope, we got to stop that. And so that's some of it. That's some of it too. Yeah. So I think that runs our course.
I think so. Yeah. I feel like we worked our way around a discussion. It's complicated, but that's why we're here.
We are here to hold the complication for you. We thank you so much for joining us for this early edition of the Good Doctors
surprise
Diagnose.
Edition of the Good Doctors. Thank you to Janny and Blind Dragon for commenting, and for folks out there, even if you didn't, for joining us live.
To the replay crew, always want to know from you, what are your problematic things? Podcast listeners, again, we'd love to know that too. In the meantime, do the YouTube and the podcast things. Subscribe wherever you are. Comment, listen, tell your friends. Though we are a small but mighty little operation here. It's Erin and Eleanor and me, and we would like to reach more people. And the only way we can really do that is through you. So if this is something that you enjoy and you love somebody who would also enjoy it, please feel free to pass along our kind of, our YouTube channel, our podcast, whatever you think, however they would engage with us. So in between now and when we see you next, there's going to be more stuff on the YouTube channel in particular. And also as well on the podcast between now and when we speak to you next. Always conversations about empathy and how we engage with difference, problematic or not. So It's been a delight to chat with you. I am Kristen.
I'm Erin.
And we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Have a good day.